My name is Victoria Langston, 40 years old, and I'm the chief marketing strategist for a media conglomerate in Dallas. My life used to be defined by two words: stable and peaceful. At least, that's what I believed for the past 13 years, since the day I married Mason. We moved into the suburban neighborhood of Willow Glen last summer, after a year of me working relentlessly to earn a promotion. Willow Glen was the kind of community designed for picture-perfect families. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and waist-high white fences that looked like they came straight out of a real estate brochure. People here always smiled when they crossed paths at the mailbox, sometimes exchanged pretty little pastries or handwritten holiday cards, but no one asked too much about each other's personal life. That exact, just enough friendliness made me feel at ease. I thought it would be the perfect place to begin a new chapter. Across the street lived a couple who looked like they had stepped out of a lifestyle magazine, Rachel and Dean Carter. She was an interior designer, always dressed in neutral-toned dresses, her soft curls perfectly in place. Dean, with his signature half-smile, was a luxury real estate agent, charming and effortlessly attentive. On our first day, they greeted us with a bottle of red wine and a box of almond cookies neatly packaged. I used to think it was a thoughtful gesture. Now I know. It was just part of a polished act. My marriage to Mason had always been seen by friends as ideal: two successful professionals living in a modern two-story gray house, mowing the lawn together on weekends and reserving a table once a month at our favorite Italian spot downtown. But behind that polished surface was a truth I never questioned. Mason was the man I loved, and I was the only woman in his heart. If someone had asked me whether I was happy, I would have nodded. Not the mechanical kind, but a firm certainty from deep inside. But trust, I've learned, isn't something you place once and forget. It needs validation, and sometimes what you uncover isn't a truth you're ready to face. I had grown used to Mason occasionally leaving town on short notice or getting home late after strategy meetings with the engineering team. I never doubted the times he said, "The guys invited me out to golf," because I thought I was the understanding wife. Not controlling, not intrusive. I didn't check his phone or question why he missed dinner. I chose to believe. To believe in what we'd built over more than a decade. Until one Monday morning, when I walked downstairs to the kitchen, the coffee machine was still warm and Mason's phone sat on the counter, screen glowing with a message that popped up clearly. "Miss you. Dean's in Chicago for 3 days. Can you come over tonight?" I froze. For 5 full seconds the world I knew shattered into fragments. And the name on the screen? None other than Rachel. No warning, no obvious signs. Or maybe I trusted too much. One single message and the marriage I had once proudly stood behind turned brutally fake. I don't know how long I stood there. I just remember my hand shaking so hard I nearly dropped the ceramic mug I was holding. All I could hear in my mind was one thing, ringing like metal striking metal. The person who betrayed me lives right across the street. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't smash anything. There was just a heavy silence in my chest. And then I started calculating. Every move. I picked up the phone, my palm ice cold. The message on the screen still glowing like a blade slicing straight through the trust I had built over the last 10 years. I opened the message thread and watched my world crumble, line by line. There were hundreds of texts between Mason and Rachel. Not just, "I miss you," or "want to hold you tonight," but selfies in the car, subtle conversations about Dean being out of town, and private jokes I'd never understand. This was intimacy that didn't exist between neighbors. One message from 2 weeks ago stopped me cold. "Your pillow still smells like my perfume from the other night." Victoria didn't even notice. My stomach twisted. Like being punched from the inside. I couldn't breathe. Not from heartbreak, but from disgust. That pillow was mine. Mason came downstairs a few minutes later, hair still damp, shirt half buttoned. He looked surprised to see me standing there, his phone in my hand. "You're up early," he said with a smile, trying to sound casual. But when he saw my eyes fixed on the screen, the smile disappeared. I slowly placed the phone on the table. "Mason," I said, my voice unfamiliar, as if it belonged to someone else. "You left your phone and forgot to delete your messages." He froze. For a moment I saw fear flash across the face of the man who once promised never to hurt me. Vic, let me explain. He reached toward me, but I stepped back, as if he were coated in oil. Explain what? That you've been sneaking around with Rachel, the woman who lives 10 steps from our front door, for 8 months? That you were sneaking off to hotel rooms while I was busting my back hitting KPIs to keep up with the mortgage? It's not what you think. I never meant for it to go that far. Ugh. So it was an accident. You tripped and fell into her bed? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to slice the air, sharp enough to surprise even me. Mason lowered his head. She came on to me. I was weak. I know I messed up, but I love you, Vic. You're the one I want to build a life with. I clenched my fists to keep from shaking. You love me. You love me, but you went into her house every time Dean was away and I wasn't home? And the worst part? You brought her here. Into this house. The house I cook for you in every night. You slept with her in our bed. He didn't answer, and that silence was all the confirmation I needed. I walked to the front door, opened a shoe cabinet and pulled out my work bag. I'm going to the office. When I come back, I don't want to see you here. You can't do that. This is my house too. Turned to him, looked him dead in the eyes. Good. Then you have 2 options. 1, leave temporarily and give me space to think. Or 2, I call Dean Carter right now and tell him everything, every message, every photo, and trust me, Dean won't be handling this politely. Mason went pale. Victoria, you wouldn't. You really think I won't? I cut him off, my stare unwavering. You've been underestimating the woman sleeping beside you for over a decade. I left him standing, frozen in the kitchen, and walked out of the house with my head held high. But inside me a storm was beginning to churn. I didn't know exactly what I'd do next. I only knew one thing. This time, I wasn't forgiving. And I wasn't staying silent. My life had just shattered, but those broken pieces, I would use them to cut every tie to the man who betrayed me. If Rachel thought she could trample over me and walk away like nothing happened, she was about to learn what it means to cross a woman who seemed quiet, but was never weak. I left the office early that day. My mind couldn't focus, not even with a major marketing plan awaiting my approval. I sent an email to my assistant citing health reasons, then drove straight to a small cafe on the east side of the city, where I always met the one person I trusted above all else, my sister, Julia. Julia is 6 years younger than me, a legal consultant for a health insurance firm, razor sharp and never one to believe in romantic coincidences. When I texted, need to meet, urgent, about Mason and the neighbor across the street, she replied with just 3 words, 15 minutes tops. We met in a quiet corner of the cafe. Julia didn't ask pointless questions. I told her everything. Every text, every detail of the betrayal. Her eyes grew colder as I spoke. When I was done, she exhaled sharply and pulled out her phone. You have screenshots of the messages? I nodded, opened the secret photo album I'd created just hours earlier, and handed it to her. He's a complete idiot, she muttered. Using his personal number, texting like it's nothing. Didn't even delete the history. This is more than enough to work with. I leaned back in my chair, my voice rough. I don't just want a separation, I want it all out in the open. In front of Mason, in front of Rachel, and yes, Dean too. Julia looked up like she was seeing a different version of me. Are you sure? Dean Carter isn't exactly soft. If this blows up, then at least 2 people will finally be held accountable for what they did. I cut in. I've been silent long enough. Julia was quiet for a moment, then nodded. All right. First, you need a separate divorce attorney, not a mediator, someone sharp enough to set hard terms. I know someone. We mapped out our plan of action. Gather solid evidence, message screenshots, call logs, and a timeline of Mason's absences that perfectly aligned with Dean's business trips. Freeze joint accounts. Mason and I had 2 joint bank accounts. Julia would guide me on how to request a temporary freeze until a court order was in place. Contact a lawyer. The next morning, I'd meet with attorney Carla Ruiz, someone Julia had worked with during a tough property case. Prepare the delivery, but not in any cliché way. I wasn't about to just toss his luggage on the porch. I wanted Rachel to open the door and see clearly. Her carefully crafted world was collapsing. right where she destroyed mine. That night, I returned home and noticed Mason wasn't in the kitchen. The bedroom light leaked through the door crack. He hadn't left yet. I walked upstairs and opened the door. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, head down, arms wrapped around his knees like a child caught red-handed. "I'm calling the lawyer tomorrow," I said calmly. "And if you withdraw $1 more from our joint accounts, I'm sending everything I have to Dean." He looked up, face pale as chalk. "Victoria, you can't do that." "I will," I replied. He rushed forward, his voice nearly pleading. "I made a mistake. But I love you. You have to believe that." I gave a dry laugh. "Your love means nothing when stacked against 8 months of betrayal in this house. You made your choice. Now live with it." That night, I slept in the home office, locked the door. Mason didn't even try knocking. The next morning, I walked into Carla Ruiz's office, files in hand. She was petite, gray-streaked hair, rimless glasses, and a voice sharp enough to make anyone retreat. After I laid out everything and showed her the evidence, she simply said, "We'll proceed by the book, but when this is over, he won't have a place left to stand." I nodded, but I didn't want it to end with just a divorce petition. That night, Julia and I sat at the dinner table finalizing the drop-off plan. "What day are you thinking?" she asked. "Friday evening. Dean flies out to Arizona for a 3-day conference. Mason knows. Rachel knows." Julia nodded. "What about the bags?" "I've chosen carefully, not everything, just enough to send a clear message. I know it all, and I'm not staying silent." I looked out the window, where Rachel's house was still lit. A slow, burning fire stirred in me. Not hatred. Not jealousy. But the clarity of a woman who had been pushed to her limits, and chose never to let anyone step on her again. On Wednesday evening, while I was sorting documents for tomorrow's meeting with Carla Ruiz, Julia walked into the living room, holding her iPad, eyes dark. "You need to see this," she said flatly. I looked up and took the tablet from her hands. The screen showed a private Instagram account named Rachel Home Wellness. The profile picture, a black and white portrait of Rachel, smiling softly with that same polished, fake sweetness I once believed was genuine. "How'd you get in?" I asked. "My friend Kaylee went to college with Rachel. They've been following each other since their interior design days. I used Kaylee's account to access it." "Just scroll down." I scrolled gently and the images appeared one by one. Rachel wearing a white silk dress, posing at a bar Mason once told me he couldn't stand because it was too loud. A delicate bracelet wrapped around her wrist, an exact copy of the birthday gift I gave Mason last year. A photo of a wine glass beside a very familiar bottle of red, captioned, "Perfect night, just us." Then I stopped at the 7th photo. Rachel beaming, raising a glass of wine, with a portion of a kitchen wall in the background, green hexagon tile backsplash, a design I personally picked out when I renovated our kitchen in 2020. There was no mistaking it. That was my kitchen. I set the iPad down, hands tightening into fists. She's been in my house while I was away on business. Julia sat beside me, not just in it, acting like it's hers. "Do you remember that 3-day trip to Denver back in March?" I nodded. "Mason had insisted I go, said if you want the promotion you need to show up." I was touched then, thinking he supported my career. Turns out, he just needed me gone. "There's more?" I asked, my voice cold, so cold it startled even me. Julia nodded, swiped to the next photo. Rachel in an oversized denim button-up holding a coffee mug. I didn't need to look closely. It was Mason's old sleep shirt. I had washed it hundreds of times, folded it neatly into the second drawer from the left. My breathing grew heavier, not from anger, but from the shock sharpening into pure resolve. "All right," I whispered. "If they dared to bring it into my home, then I'll bring it out in front of everyone." Julia squeezed my hand gently. "You're changing the plan?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Not just delivering. I want Rachel to be the one to open the door, and Dean to be the one who closes it." We sat in silence for a few moments. Julia exhaled. "Then we have to time it right. Dean needs to be gone, but not too far to miss the aftermath." I got up, walked over to my desk and grabbed my phone. In our Willow Glen neighborhood group chat, Dean had shared his real estate showcase schedule. I scrolled back to last week's messages. This Saturday Dean's working the Fort Worth home show all day from 8 a.m. to almost 4 p.m., I read aloud. Mason will know, Rachel will know, they'll think it's a safe window. That's when we show up. Julia smiled, half impressed, half worried. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I nodded. I used to think silence was noble, but now I know. Silence only protects the guilty. That night we began assembling the luggage. I chose 3 large black suitcases, not to pack too much, but just enough to make sure Rachel couldn't deny a single thing. The first, Mason's 2 favorite suits. The dress shoes he bought after getting promoted, and the cologne Rachel once described as bold but irresistible. The second, a wedding photo in a cracked frame. The wristwatch his mother gave him, and the sleepwear I gifted him for our 10-year anniversary. The last one, Julia suggested we add a little bonus, Mason's old idea notebook. On the first page, my handwriting. Always believe in you, V. I folded the notebook, slipped it into the center of the suitcase. Carefully, as if I were wrapping up a trust that had been broken, returning it to where it had been destroyed. Then I sent Mason a short message. You should be at her place Saturday afternoon. I'm sending your things. You left something behind? No reply necessary. I knew he'd be there. And this time he wouldn't be ready, neither would Rachel. That Saturday, Dallas was cooler than usual. A thin veil of clouds softened the sky, but there was nothing soft in me. I drove slowly down Willow Glen, a street that once made me feel safe, now only made me feel trapped, fake. Julia sat beside me, eyes locked on the 3 black suitcases resting quietly in the back seat, like sealed letters waiting to be delivered to their rightful recipient. We parked about 30 feet from Rachel's house. From where I sat, I could see the lower window curtains swaying slightly with the breeze. I sent a quick text to Mrs. Eleanor, the elderly neighbor next door to the Carters, and the same woman who texted me earlier that morning. Dean left at 8 a.m. with his files and coffee. She's home alone. I replied, thank you. It's almost done. Julia popped the trunk. I pulled out the first suitcase, each wheel turning on the pavement like the click of justice falling into place. Not revenge. A reminder. I saw everything, and I won't reward betrayal with silence. We walked up the Carters' porch. Julia knocked. Not long after the door opened, Rachel stood there in a champagne silk robe, her blonde hair slightly tousled, like she'd just finished blow-drying. She blinked at the sight of me and the 3 suitcases, then tried to force a polite smile. Victoria, is everything all right? I smiled thinly. Oh, everything's fine. I'm just here to return a few things Mason left behind. I rolled the first suitcase right to her feet. She froze, gripping the doorframe as if she needed it to stay standing. This one has the suits you once complimented him on. I figured he'll need them for more nights out. I nudged the second one forward. These are gifts from his family. You might want to hold on to them. Could be helpful for those getting to know the in-laws moments. The last one I held on to. And this one, this is what's left of something called a marriage. Victoria, wait, Rachel stammered. I've waited long enough, I said, my eyes locked on her. For the past 8 months, I unknowingly let you into my house, into my bed, into the life I thought was solid. Now it's your turn to open the door. A sound behind me made me stop mid-sentence. A man's voice called out, "What's going on?" I turned around. Dean Carter. He stood at the top of the steps just a few feet away, still holding a coffee he hadn't sipped. His eyes swept past me, pausing on the black luggage lined up on the porch, then shifted to Rachel. Confusion etched across his face. You didn't tell me you were expecting someone?" Rachel began to tremble. "I thought you'd be at the Fort Worth Housing Expo all day." Dean frowned. "It got cancelled. Technical issues. I meant to call but forgot my phone. So what is this?" I took a deep breath, looked Dean in the eye. "Dean," I said clearly, "my husband and your wife have been having an affair for 8 months. In my house while you and I were working, traveling, building futures they were quietly destroying." Dean turned to Rachel. "Is that true?" Rachel stepped back. "Dean, I'm sorry, it's not what you think." His voice dropped low and sharp. Then what is it? Explain it. What are these 3 suitcases? Is Victoria making this all up? I handed him my phone, opened a photo folder of evidence. You want proof? These are their texts. Photos taken inside my home. There's even one of Rachel wearing my husband's sleep shirt. Rachel screamed, but Dean had already snatched the phone and was scrolling. His face changed with each swipe, fury taking form, feature by feature. You slept with someone else's husband, he said slowly, and kept living under my roof like nothing happened, laughing with me every night like you were some model wife. Rachel burst into tears. Dean, I messed up. I got caught up in it, but I still love you. Dean turned to me, his voice gravelly. Thank you for telling me. You didn't need to carry this alone. He stood frozen in the doorway, eyes locked on the phone screen. Each message revealed more, subtle, shameless, and undeniable. Rachel stood behind him, sobbing, but no one paid attention to her anymore. I tightened my grip on my handbag, steadying my voice. You see, I didn't make any of this up. I'm not someone who enjoys drama on her neighbor's porch. But when they brought betrayal into my house, into my bed, I figured I had the right to bring the truth out into the open. Dean nodded quietly, like the words on that screen had finally confirmed all the feigned suspicions that had lingered in his mind. Now everything was unmistakably clear. And just as I was about to leave, a familiar sound hit my ears. Tires screeching. A black SUV pulled up sharply to the curb, the door flung open, and Mason stepped out, his face draining of color the moment he saw me standing on the Carter's doorstep, the 3 suitcases stacked neatly behind me. Mason, I said, my voice calm. Perfect timing. He glanced at Rachel, then at Dean, then back to me, his eyes pleading. Victoria, this isn't necessary. Can we talk in private? I gave a cold smile. Oh? So when you were cheating on me for 8 months, privacy didn't matter. But now that I'm telling the truth, suddenly it's not necessary? Mason stepped closer, his voice softening, more urgent. I know I screwed up. I was planning to end things with Rachel, but you don't have to do this in front of the whole neighborhood. I inhaled deeply, then turned to Dean. Do you want to read the parts where Mason called Rachel the only one who understands him, or when they planned that Galveston weekend while I was giving a boardroom presentation? Dean nodded. Show me everything. I handed him the phone again. He read silently, his face darkening by the second. The messages were all there. Plans, photos, dates. That lined up with times Rachel claimed to be at the spa or Mason claimed to be brainstorming with engineers. A few moments later, Dean returned the phone to me. I don't need to read any more. He turned to Rachel. You'll be out of my house by tomorrow night. Rachel's face went white. Dean, I don't have anywhere to go. This isn't what you think. Dean cut her off, his voice low and firm. You're right. It's worse than anything I ever imagined. I looked at Mason, who opened his mouth to speak, when an older voice chimed in from the next door gate. Well, I guess it's all finally out now. All 4 of us turned. Mrs. Eleanor stood there holding a tray of cookies like she'd been in the middle of baking and heard the noise. She didn't bother hiding her disappointment. I've seen Rachel sneaking around too many times when Dean was out, she said, stepping forward slowly. I hinted at it with Victoria, but I suppose there's no need for hints anymore. A few other neighbors had begun to gather along the sidewalk. This scene was unavoidable now. Willow Glen wasn't noisy, but gossip traveled faster than Wi-Fi. Someone walked a dog, another sipped coffee, all pretending not to stare, but watching every second. Mason finally spoke, his eyes still locked on mine. Victoria, please, come home with me. We can talk. We can start over. I looked straight at him, no longer shaking. I've frozen the accounts. The attorney will file for separation on Monday. You can take the suitcases back, assuming Rachel still wants to host you. Mason stepped back. Rachel clutched his sleeve, desperate. We need to talk. I can't do this alone. Dean smirked. I think you'd better get used to that. The air on the sidewalk froze for a moment before I turned to Julia, who had stood silently the entire time. Let's go, I said softly. It's cold enough here already. We walked back to the car, leaving behind a closing door, whispers from the neighbors, and 2 people who had just lost everything because they thought no one would ever speak up. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew Mason was watching, but this time, his gaze had no hold on me. Just 2 days after those 3 suitcases showed up on the Carters' doorstep, the legal separation papers were delivered to Mason's attorney. I didn't have to meet him in person. Carla Ruiz, poised and composed, handled everything for me. Hill didn't say a word when he received the papers, she told me. Just froze. I think he knew he had nothing left to hold on to. I kept the house, not because I wanted to cling to walls that had witnessed betrayal, but because I didn't want to hand over anything I'd worked to build to someone who never appreciated it. Mason moved into a rental apartment on the west side of the city. I didn't care who he lived with, what he ate, or whether he still saw Rachel. Rumors came, sure. A former colleague texted me saying he's taken a leave of absence. Claims he's finding balance after a personal setback. I replied with just one word: good. And Rachel? 3 weeks later, a silver pickup truck pulled up in front of the Carter house with a fabric-covered trunk. Mrs. Eleanor, sipping tea on her porch, texted me calmly, "Rachel's gone. Michigan plates." Dean never left Willow Glen. He sold their old house and rented another one in the same neighborhood, quieter, more private. One day, while I was trimming the front hedge, he passed by, paused, then walked up. "I'm sorry for everything you had to go through," he said. I nodded. "Thank you for not denying the truth. Not everyone has the courage to do that." He stayed quiet for a moment, then asked, "Has Mason tried to reach out?" I gave a small smile. "He has, but not for the right reasons." Just a week after receiving the separation papers, Mason started sending emails. The first was a short apology. Then came long, rambling messages about emptiness, how he was in therapy, realizing the value of what he'd lost, and would never forgive himself if I didn't give him a chance to make things right. I didn't reply, not a single word. Then came the flowers, bouquets of pure white blooms, the kind I used to love, sent to my office with a card that read, "If only I could hear your voice one more time." I left them all at reception. The girls at the company took them home, placed them around the office. As for me, I didn't need the scent of deception lingering in my workspace. Carla once asked, "Do you want to include financial terms in the divorce agreement? You clearly have the upper hand." I shook my head. "I just want to walk away clean, no more ties." She nodded, saying nothing. Some things silence honors more deeply than words. As rumors began to fade, Willow Glen returning to its peaceful facade, I started living a different life. No rush, no frantic attempts to fill the void, just living for myself. I changed the curtains, repainted the kitchen, got rid of every item Mason had chosen. Each small update was like a quiet ending to something I once thought was permanent. Julia still visited me every week. She was the first to help me believe I could come through this without being crushed. One day, as we had lunch in the backyard, she smirked. "You know, if there ever comes a time when you feel okay again, Dean doesn't seem to be seeing anyone yet." I smiled. "I haven't thought about that, but I'm not afraid anymore." Exactly. I wasn't afraid. Not of betrayal, not of pitiful looks, not of being alone. Because I had stood in front of my entire neighborhood with my pain laid bare. And I didn't fall apart. One late March afternoon, as the sunlight began to fade over the rooftops of Willow Glen, I got a message from Dean. "I'm flying out to Santa Fe next week for a work trip. On the way back, I'm stopping in Colorado for a few days. Quiet place, clean air, no drama, no familiar SUVs parked outside your window. You in?" I stared at the message, then chuckled. He always had a way of speaking gently without dodging the truth. "If you promise I don't have to listen to country music the whole ride, I'll consider it," I replied. He texted back instantly, "Deal. But you're not allowed to bring your laptop." And just like that, the deal was sealed. 3 days later, I packed a small suitcase, left my work phone on the table, and got in the car with Dean. The trip began in silence, but not an awkward one. It was the kind of silence that felt safe between two people who didn't need to force understanding. Along the way, we stopped at a small roadside diner, Dean's favorite from college. He told me how he almost married a girl once just because she laughed the way my mom liked. I laughed. It had been a long time since I laughed without weight behind it. When we arrived in Colorado, dusk had just settled in. Dean rented a small cabin by the edge of the forest. No traffic sounds, no city noise, just the rustle of wind and the scent of pine in the air. No Wi-Fi, he said, handing me the key. Intentional. I didn't argue. I opened the door, set down my bag, and looked out at the woods beyond. In that moment, I realized I hadn't thought about Mason once that day. Not because I'd tried to forget, but because he no longer had a place in my mind. We stayed for 3 days, morning hikes, quiet reading in the afternoon, firewood and hot cocoa at night. Dean never asked about the emails I didn't answer from Mason, never brought up the luggage delivery scene. He was just there. With me. A silent companion demanding nothing, judging nothing. On the last night, as we sat on the cabin steps watching the fire fade, Dean said softly, "Do you ever think, if we hadn't been betrayed, we might never have truly understood ourselves?" I turned to look at him. His face glowed faintly in the fading embers. Not sad, not bitter, just a man who had once been broken, now piecing himself back together with quiet strength. "I don't know," I answered. "I just know. I no longer want to be the woman who tries to save something dead just because she's afraid to start over." Dean nodded. He didn't need to say anything more. When we returned to Dallas, spring had taken hold. Trees in the neighborhood were budding, as if untouched by everything that had happened here. I stepped back into my house, into a kitchen newly painted in soft olive green. I set down my bag and looked around. The sense of unfamiliarity was gone. This was my home now, not the remnants of an old marriage. Mason still sent emails. I didn't open them. I didn't need more apologies. I didn't need a final conversation, a handshake, or a tear. I chose to let go by simply not holding on, and that was enough. The next morning, as I watered the plants on the balcony, Mrs. Eleanor stood by the fence, holding a cup of tea. "Was Colorado as beautiful as they say?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. I smiled. "It was, but not because of the view. It's where I learned how to breathe again." She nodded, as if she'd known all along. The story isn't over, but the pain has stepped aside, and in the space it left behind, I've begun planting something new. From self-respect, from silence more powerful than any speech, and from a friendship still undefined, but warm enough to keep me from ever feeling lost again. The first morning back in routine after the Colorado trip, I woke not from an alarm, but from the tapping of birds on the roof and sunlight spilling through the new cream curtains. No jarring dreams, no weight in my chest, just peace, clear and strangely quiet. I walked into the kitchen and brewed a cup of chamomile tea. The mug I held wasn't one of the old matching set Mason picked out. I'd replaced everything in the house, not out of anger but because I wanted my surroundings to reflect exactly who I was becoming. A woman who had survived betrayal but wasn't defined by it. I still remember the day I shut the door behind Mason. There were no tears, no yelling, just a choice. That I wouldn't let a weak man drag me down with his cruelty. Someone once asked me why I didn't go public with everything, didn't destroy Rachel's career or humiliate them both. I simply answered because I don't need to become them to prove I'm stronger. I chose to return everything with sharp silence, with a deliberate retreat, and with a plan for myself, to rebuild my life from the inside out, from rubble to strength. Dean is my friend now, a companion with no pressure, no rush. We have quiet morning coffees, evening dog walks, and random grocery trips just to split a chocolate bar. We don't define it. We both know. What we need isn't new love to fill a void, it's safe presence. Once, while Julia and I sat on the balcony watching the neighbor's cat curl up on a rooftop, she asked, "If you could go back, would you change anything?" I thought for a long time. "No," I said. "I wouldn't want to live it again, but I wouldn't erase it either. Because without that crash, I would have never learned how to truly stand on my own 2 feet. I used to think betrayal was the end. But really, it was just a jolt that woke me from the long dream of a dream that love held together by one-sided sacrifice was enough. It's not. Real love doesn't require you to abandon yourself to hold on to someone else. Now every morning I wake up, I no longer think of the past as a scar but as skin that's healed, I don't romanticize what was, I don't wear I'm fine like a badge to earn admiration. I simply live in rhythm with my own heartbeat, slow, honest, and whole. I draw the curtains closed, pour another sip of tea, and step out onto the porch. The seasons are shifting, and I no longer look back, because everything that matters is ahead of me. Victoria's story reminds us that sometimes, the most brutal betrayal becomes the doorway to our greatest transformation. In real life, we can't control what others do, but we can choose how we respond. Instead of retaliating with pain, rebuild with dignity and peace. Healing doesn't need to be loud, just steady. And sometimes, silence and stepping away are the clearest answers for those who once underestimated your worth. What do you think of Victoria's journey? What would you have done in her shoes? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, powerful stories about family and life.